The Prabodhcandrodaya is a very influential Sanskrit play, written at the end of the 11th century by a poet named Krishna Mishra. The play is rooted in Advaita Vedanta philosophy, and some scholars think it may be the reason for Advaita Vedanta's prominence from the 12th century onwards. The significance of the text is testified from the fact that there are nearly 30 commentaries on the text, as well as dozens of regional translations of the text. There is even a Persian version commissioned by the Mughal Empire, Shah Jahan's eldest son, Dara Shikoh, who was Aurangzeb's elder brother, as well as a Braj Bhasha version called the Prabodhcandrodaya, written by a Nirmala Sikh, Pandit Gulab Singh. The Prabodhcandrodaya, or the Rise of the Moon of Awakening, is an allegorical play. And an allegorical play meaning the poet is using the setting of the play to draw out a philosophical point here about how one is to be spiritually liberated. And the characters of the play represent certain characteristics, traits, virtues, and vices. It was thought that to relay a philosophical message to the king at the time, who patroned this composition, the poet structured this play between a battle of two forces. On one side, he had an army of virtues, and on the other side, he had an army of vices. This battle was being staged so that the personified self of the play could be liberated from the bondage that was placed upon it by the forces of the vices. The personified self, mind, had two wives. The first being Paravrti, or that which leads to entanglement into the world, and this marriage brought about a son, delusion, or moha, who was the general of the army of the vices. The second wife of the mind was Naravrti, or that which leads to enlightenment, and this marriage brought about a son, discernment, or viveka, who was the general of the army of the virtues. So the story is full of humorous and insightful dialogue between the different characters, the virtues and the vices, and this allows the author to fully expand and explain the scope, the strength, and the influence that these virtues and vices have over personified self. In personifying the different virtues and vices, the author also gets to play with the familial relations between the characters, which also draws out philosophical points. So for example, ego gives birth to greed, then greed gives birth to hypocrisy, and hypocrisy to falsehood. The author also tries to show both sides of an argument of where he can. So for example, in the first act of the play, Desire, or Kama, is speaking to his wife, Rati, or pleasure, about how bad knowledge is, and that if knowledge is born into the family, the entire family will be destroyed. The family here being the family of vices. The self will be emancipated and will go beyond the influences of these characters. The tale does not only personify different virtues and vices, but also philosophical schools get personified, and whether they work for or against King Discernment's plan to emancipate the self. So for example, the Jatavaka, or the materialist school of thought, they are pushed to the forefront of the battle lines when the battle first commences by the other atheistic schools, such as the Jains, the Buddhists, the Kapalikas, and the Jatavakas vanish instantly upon receiving their first blow from the enemy. And that's supposed to speak to the classic rebuttal against hedonism, that hedonism vanishes upon the first sign of suffering that it receives. But going back to the plot, it was King Discernment's plan to rid the self of the negative influences placed upon it by the vices, such that the self could then be emancipated and liberated. And to do this, he sets on a mission to marry sacred scripture, or Upanishad, knowing that this will bring about the birth of vidya, or knowledge, as well as prabodha, or enlightenment. And to do this, he'll need the assistance of his friends and his top warriors. His top three warriors are Vastu Vichara, or the investigation into truth, who destroys Kam, or desire, Kashama, patience, who destroys anger, and Santosha, contentment, who destroys greed. Numerous other virtues and vices get at odds with each other, but once the path is cleared for the self, then the mind has the ability to be in the company of Vairaga, or dispassion. And once the mind is in the company of Vairagya, he primarily takes Navritti, or that which leads to enlightenment, as his wife. Then King Discernment is allowed to marry sacred scripture or Upanishad, and that union brings about a daughter, Vidya, knowledge, and Prabodha, a son, enlightenment. And when both of these are together, then the self is emancipated and liberated, which concludes the tale.